hope that text encourages you prepare your hearts as we prepare our hearts to receive the Lord's table. For those who may be visiting with us, I want to explain we participate in the Lord's table we kind of put it in the centerpiece of the middle of our services and where we think it kind of really belongs. And so we're going to look at a few texts of Scripture as we prepare our hearts for the reception of the Lord's table. Then we'll receive the Lord's table, and then we'll actually finish the message. So it's kind of a part A, part B, if I can put it that way, or the introduction, and we go right into the Lord's table, and then we look at the rest. The passage of Scripture we're going to be looking at today, and we're beginning another section. We've been working through 1 Timothy, and I love the theme of the Church of the Living God, and in fact, 1 Timothy 3:15 helps us to understand that Paul's writing so we know how to conduct ourselves in the household of God, the Church of the Living God. The descriptions teach us much, that we are learning through God's revelation, His inspired, infallible revelation, what worship ought to look like, and some of the things God has told us about worship, about our presence, being in the presence of God to worship. And so He's given us really help and also correctives, because there were false teachers that Paul was having to deal, or really Timothy was being left in Ephesus to address. That's part of the context of 1 Timothy. You're addressing some of the false teaching that's going on, some of the perversion of worship has to be addressed, and so he's giving instructions to help the church. Now, part of those instructions, and this can sometimes kind of like, well, that's a little shift, right? We get in chapter 3, and all of a sudden it's these qualifications for these people who are called bishop in this one text, or deacons later, and we're going to find out one of the things about Baptist, all right? So the Trinity Baptist Church, I'm unapologetically a Baptist. What I mean by that is I actually do believe that the principles that are taught, that the Baptist Church stands for, are taught in the Word of God. Okay, so it's not that I just claim a Baptist heritage and label and stick it on me and run around and say, well, I like that label. The labels are important if they're connected to truth. If they're not connected to biblical truth, then the labels are not important. But the label is important in the sense that it does remind us of biblical authority. That's one of the principles of being a Baptist church, that we don't have an authority greater than the Bible. You don't have an authority greater than God. So God is actually the author of truth. This is His church. It's not our church. We get the privilege of meeting in His presence by His promise under the authority of His word, and then also under the authority of two offices. There's two offices given to the church, and that is the office of a pastor and the office of a deacon. And so part of it, as you should be asking yourself, is, okay, Paul, you've left Timothy in Ephesus to deal with issues. What does that have to do with it? And the answer is, the church is protected from false teachers by having qualified leaders. If you don't have people that actually withstand that qualification, the church is going to be overrun by false teaching. And so the church is protected from the inroads of false doctrine through actually appointing people to the two offices that are called on to actually spiritually lead God's people. And those two offices of pastor and deacon have to have people qualified, and they must meet those qualifications in order to protect the church. Now, I want to also address this. Some of you are thinking, here, great, Pastor, you're preaching at yourself. Amen. So I have two in the audience that are actually ordained pastors as well. So this message is going to be for Pastor Randy, Pastor Rob, and myself. We'll repent and believe afterwards, but all the rest you just get to sit in. I hope you understand that as Paul is addressing leadership, I guess I could get down to the deacons too, because we're not going to hit that one yet today, but the deacons are addressed in the text. So we could just say everybody else can be dismissed. This is only a pastor-deacon message, and I hope you would get that would not be appropriate. He's addressing the church, and he's also reminding the church, if the church is going to stand against the inroads of false doctrine, the church needs to have men qualified to lead. And in giving that, if the people qualified to lead are supposed to meet a certain standard, probably a good idea if everybody does. It really isn't that God's just saying, okay, this is just for leadership, all the rest of you don't worry about it. What He is really pointing out is how we live a life that honors Christ, and the issue is that those who will lead must measure up. But all of us should measure up. And so as we'll look at these qualities, and so I'm actually kind of crafted, if you will, the outline to address all of us, because it does. It has specific, obviously, application to the offices, and we'll talk about those. But there's three things Paul does say, as a manner of introduction, about the nature of pastoral ministry that I think is helpful for us to consider. And it is, you look at verse 1, and as he says here in verse 1, it's a faithful saying. This is a trustworthy saying. It is Paul uses this several different places to say this is a trustworthy reality that the church must embrace. And here he then states right behind it, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. So if I put it back here, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. The two words translated desire in this text are actually two different Greek words. So desire. The first one deals with more of an aspiration, idea of reaching out, having this desire for this position, for this office. It is used of seeking, and then the second one speaks of being really seeking to accomplish a goal, to strive after. So we have this, or I should say that's the first one. The second one is a strong desire to secure something, having your heart set upon it. And the point just making is that it's a compelling thing. That because God calls men to ministry, I do believe there's a call of God in the life of a man to the office of a pastor that is a compelling calling. It's not a mystical voice, not a mystical experience. It is a burden of heart. If I could, and I would compare it to Nehemiah a little bit, what Nehemiah was burdened of heart to return back and build the walls of Jerusalem. He was compelled, a burden of heart. He could not escape it. In fact, he even risked his life by going to the king, the pagan king, who he was a cupbearer of, and he asked for permission to leave his service and go back and rebuild walls for what that king would have seen as a former rebellious entity. And here's the cupbearer who's supposed to be loyal to the king. In fact, he's a trusted man. In fact, he's going to get the poison first. In fact, he would have the most direct access to poison the king. So he has to be trusted. So as a trusted one in the court of a king, he's asking permission to leave the king, go back. There's something compelling in his heart, more compelling than saving his life. And so when God burdened my heart about ministry, surrender call to preach, I remember speaking to a pastor, older pastor, who just told me this. He said, if you can go do anything else, go do it. You're not called. If you'd be content doing anything else, go do it. You're not called. And so it's a compelling burden of heart. Ultimately, that calling is something God puts on a heart. The position, Paul is saying, the position is to be desired. It is ultimately, he's going to say, it is a fine or a noble work. He's speaking of that which is actually honorable, excellent, of highest quality. It is a work to be desired. Lloyd Jones would say, to me, the work of preaching is the highest and the greatest and the most glorious calling to which anyone's ever been called. And so it is one to be desired, but actually it's only one to be filled by those who are actually called. And so there is a specific calling in that. And now we live in a day, and I'll just be honest, that our culture has really sought in every way to diminish any levels of positions of authority in society. So the whole movement, even defund the police and all the rhetoric that we get into, let's find the worst example of anybody in authority, and let's find as many of those as we can and basically paint everybody with that broad brush to say this is what everyone's like, whether they're police authorities or whether they're administrative authorities or governing authorities or come into the church, it's pastors. And in a fallen world, there always are going to be less than ideal leaders because all leaders are still sinners. And so there's always going to be fallen men in leadership whose, if you measure them by their faults, would seem less than attractive. So that's always going to be true. So if you just want to attack any level of leadership, you can do that. And as you do that, you bring a culture of disrespect into regard as a part of then increasing what appeals to people about that is we raise levels of personal autonomy. So if I don't have an authority I need to be under, then I have my personal autonomy. That kind of logic actually is very destructive to all of society. It is destructive within their own local church as well. One of the things that God's given leadership for, and even in the church especially, is that ultimately God, those who become wise in their own eyes are not really, it's not a good thing, okay? Like Proverbs would put it this way, do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than him. And I think we'd at least recognize that a fool is not usually a positive commendation. Most people don't run around with a medal on their chest or something that says it's an honor. I'm a fool. We don't do that. In fact, we don't want to be called foolish. But did you hear how Proverbs put it? There's a status below that. And that status that's worse than being a fool is to be wise in your own eyes. And that's one of the things that God's given to the church in terms of the instruction of the Word. And we need to hear the Word because the nature of sin, the nature of my depravity, of your depravity, is I want to be right in my own eyes. And the authority of God's Word is to be proclaimed without apology, and actually isn't supposed to be. I understand, and this probably offends, I hope it doesn't offend any of you here. For those online, perhaps it will. But the reality is, this office is called to proclaim what God has said without apology. It is not an office of spiritual guidance counselor where I offer you three recommendations on how you might better live. This is the office called to say, "Thus saith the Lord." And a man who does not have the courage to stand in this pulpit before God's people and proclaim what God has said is not called to the office of a pastor. It is a noble work, it's an honorable work, but it's a work that runs across the grain of our own flesh, of our own sinfulness, because it actually exposes our sin for our sinfulness. It exposes our folly, but it also protects us from being wise in our own eyes. It is also a hard work. It is a disciplined work. It is a lifetime of commitment to a work that is never finished. There's never a day the project's over. I joke with Pastor Randy because we share this together. We enjoy doing some physical projects because eventually you can walk away from it and say, that one's done. But it's never done in your life or my life. Between now and glory, we're in the middle of a battle against sin, where we are fighting against our own flesh and against the culture and against the devil, and we stand in this battle. At times it seems overwhelming, but we have to be reminded, even as we were in Sunday school this morning, that we have to remember the victory's already won, and it's ours in Christ. He won the victory, so I can fight in the middle of the battle with absolute hope and confidence that the battle will be won, because it's already been won in Christ. And so it is a work, a difficult work. Ken and Dean, so both Rob and I served with him back in Michigan, and Rob went out to be an assistant pastor with him in Maine. And this quote I wrote down years ago, but Ken, after taking the senior pastorate in Maine, I think he was preaching. I don't remember if it was a men's retreat or he just came back to Troy. He was preaching, and he made this comment to the church. I was on staff still at that time, but he said, he grew up in pastor's home. He said he took the senior pastor. He said, I thought I knew what I was getting into. He said, but, after you actually didn't get in there, he goes, it's a little bit like, so we're watching, if some of you are watching the Olympics, you watch them swim. Okay, when you watch somebody swim versus swimming, there's a big difference. I can watch it and say, yeah, I could do that, get in the pool. The other part of the reality is when you get in the pool, you could actually drown. The pastorate's a little like that. You can watch what a senior pastor does, but once you get in the water, it's a whole lot more dangerous than you ever thought. You can actually drown. So I still remember Ken's quote, but it really does highlight that the ministry is a fine work, but it's a hard work, a demanding one, and that's just part of the nature of the ministry. But we're going to we'll look at the Lord's table text as we prepare our hearts, and then I'll ask the deacons to come, and we're going to prepare our hearts to receive. And really part of it, why do I do an introduction about all the text we're going to look at? Because we are preparing our hearts to hear from God about the matter before us in the text. And so we are going to worship the Lord for what He has already done, do it in remembrance of me. We are to rekindle that affection for Christ, and then as we are doing that, we are preparing our hearts to actually hear from God as God's Word is then unfolded. And then asking God to do a work in our life to further conform us to Christ. So 1 Corinthians chapter 11, for I received from the Lord, I also delivered to you, the Lord Jesus, on the same night which He was betrayed, took bread. And when He had given thanks, He broke and said, take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same manner, He took also the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till He comes. Therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. And so I underlined all those yous in there because they're all plural. And it's really meant this is a corporate reality. We do this together. We are doing this together, and as we do this, we are proclaiming the reality that Jesus died for us, and he's coming again that we might be with him forever. So there's a tremendous encouragement in the midst of that, and the warning then, right? Don't do this in a way that's frivolous. Don't do this in a way that's trite. Don't do this as a ritual. Don't do this in a way you don't consider the gravity of what actually these elements represent. Don't do this in a way that trivializes Christ's death on a cross. Don't do that. In fact, rather than do that, examine yourself. And what do we examine? Well, we examine, as he would say, he goes on and says, so eat and drink of the cup, for he who drinks in unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. So the warning continues, but then he gets, what do we examine? We examine our relationship to the Lord's body, the church. Do we love his church? Do we serve his church? Are we really rightly related to one another? Because the church is not a building, not a place, not a service, it's people. So are we loving the people of God? Are we serving the people of God? And if we're not, the warning continues. There's a consequence. There are many weak and sick among you, and many sleep. God takes worship serious, do we? And that's the call, that's the ask, it's the demand as we prepare our hearts that we take worship serious, that we consider it for what it really is all about. Living a life that honors God, so structuring this text so that we understand that these biblical mandates or qualifications, if you will, for those who serve the church in the office of a pastor, really do have application in all of our lives, and so kind of titling it along that way. So I'm going to read the text, and then we'll make a few comments and begin working through. I don't anticipate that as you look at the outline, I'm actually going to get through all of those today. So we're actually organizing this along 3 lines, and it's really the text kind of goes, well, when you look at the qualifications, if you want to bring them to an organizational structure, now, sometimes pastors all get the knock of we alliterate whether it works or not, okay? Sometimes alliteration works and is helpful. This time I felt it works and is helpful. So we're looking along the lines of character, conduct, and competency. So there are issues of character that are called on that we are to reflect Christ-like character, and those are what we're going to focus our attention on this morning. Then if we have that Christ-like character, there are certain ways that's going to be fleshed out in terms of our conduct, things we will and won't do, okay? So the conduct matters, it does matter, but it should be then if we have Christ-like character, then this is some of the conduct issues that will be there, okay? So in other words, you can say I have Christ-like character, but if the walk doesn't match the talk, it's not there, okay? So he deals with some walk issues, so the issues of character, and so when we talk about those character issues, we can have all kinds of ideas of what that looks like or doesn't look like, which may be helpful, sometimes may not. So he is really going to give us some conduct issues that they're related directly to the character issue. So this has to be true if this is true. And then there's some skills, and probably the thing that we would be a little surprised by this is that in the qualifications of leadership in the church, the skills category, there's not a whole lot there. Because it's God's church. He actually does the work. So the competency issues, they're there and they're important. But there are a whole lot less. I mean, we tend to think, okay, they have to be a super skilled guy and they have to have all these skills, and here's the skill set we're looking for in the guy that's going to be a pastor. The Bible actually says, here's the character issues we're looking for. These are the character issues. These are conduct issues that reflect the character. And then, yeah, there's some skill issues, but they're a lot less. Because the issue, we can tend to trust human ability more than we trust God's grace. And that can be true in how we appoint leaders, how we look at leaders, who's going to be a successful leader, who's not. And I think of Samuel as he's going to appoint a king. And the first king God gave Israel was a man who was pretty impressive to look upon, head and shoulders above everybody. It was Saul. And he stood out as a physical specimen in all the different ways, and so it kind of made sense to people. Yeah, that's a king. And then when Saul proved to be absolutely, really a reprobate, lost man, filled with ego and not much heart, no heart for God, God then has the next king appointed, and Samuel's right looking at all the sons, all of David's brothers, and that one looks good, that one looks good, that one looks good, and God's like, nope. Remember, you look on the outside, I look on the heart. I look at the character. And so we see that that's really an appointment, a very important reality. 1 Timothy chapter 3, I'll read this whole section and we'll work through some of it this morning. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. This should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway because of the day we live in. The text does not say if somebody identifies as a man and desires the office of a bishop. And it's going to be the husband of one wife, so this is a very gender-specific issue. Okay? Text is not unclear. It is actually not even up for debate, though it's debated today. It shouldn't be. The text is fundamentally clear. So office of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, apt to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, not gentle. Not gentle. That's it. Throw that one out. But gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. The one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. The man does not know how to rule his own house, how willing to take care of the church of God. Not a novice, lest he be puffed up with pride and fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall in reproach and snare of the devil. So certainly we see a couple of interactions that the devil really, one of the places he glories in is discrediting people. One of the things he's very good at, and one of the things he aims at, is to discredit anybody that is in positions of leadership, especially spiritual leadership. So he has many snares, he has many approaches, he has many ways. He seeks to discredit, to make seem, or actually to disqualify those who would serve in that office or in that position as a spiritual leader. That term translated bishop, by the way, is episkopos, generally translated overseer, which gets into the role of the pastor having oversight of the spiritual well-being of God's people. And that's really the emphasis. As the author of Hebrews would say, he cares for your souls. He looks out for your souls. And so it's the spiritual oversight of God's people that he's called to have. So I'm blessed to serve here with two other men who God has called, God's equipped to serve this church as in the office of pastor. I think we each understand the nature and the accountability that comes with our calling. But as we look at this, we want to remind each of you that this is, while given to the office of the pastor as qualifications, it is actually setting forth a life that honors the Lord. Or as Jesus would put it this way, because we try to have a discipleship culture here, meaning that a disciple is a follower, a learner of Jesus Christ. So we who have come to know Jesus Christ are then to follow him. That should be evident, but obvious, maybe I should put it that way, and then we desire that to be evident in our life, that we are followers of Jesus Christ, that my fundamental identity is not pastor. I'm a pastor of this church. It's a responsibility I've been given, called to, but my fundamental identity is a sinner redeemed by grace, one who belongs as a child of the King. And I'm a child of the King of glory because I've been adopted in the very family of God. I've been rescued from my sin by Jesus Christ. So I've received the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ. That's who I am. And because of that, God has then also further than qualified to call to an office. But a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ, is not above their teacher, and one of the roles of the pastor is apt to teach. So not above the teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. Pastors, deacons, spiritual leaders in the church are called on to be examples to the flock. Obviously, they're not going to be perfect examples. There's not everything about our lives that we would ever say, emulate this. It's kind of like, one of the words, you're in redneck country when they say, watch this, and you come do it too. Anyway, there's a lot there. We're not calling you to go do something foolish. Watch what I do, and let's go do it too. This is a call to actually follow close to Christ, or as Paul would put it, to go that is, follow me as I follow Christ. There's a following of a teacher to the extent that that teacher themselves are following Christ. So don't get lost in discipleship. I mean, there are personalities issues that come along. Some people are more influential than others for a lot of different reasons. Some to have that, the magnetic personality. We all have magnetic personalities. Some of us draw people to ourselves, others repulse. So we, one way or the other, we have that magnetic. We're one pole or the other, and we push people towards us or away from us. But that's not, in that context, you might have that charismatic personality. You make friends easy. You don't know a stranger. People are kind of attracted to that. They like you. In that comes an awful lot of pressure to actually just be liked. And at the point you become the one who just wants to be liked, you might bow to what the culture expects you to do rather than actually be like Jesus. And on the other side, for those who are not as extroverted and don't make friends as easy, you can say, well, it's just I'm an introvert, I'm kind of quiet, I keep to myself, and we don't have that out. And most of you are looking at me like, Pastor, you just put yourself in that category. You can't be an introvert. Yes, I am. Absolutely. And God has to push me out of all those comfort zones and say, you don't get to be that. It doesn't matter that's your comfort zone. There are people out here who are dying, and it's an eternal reality, and I've called you and equipped you and promised to go with you, so get over yourself, get out there and engage people. And it's just that place of dependency that we need to be. And so as disciples, we're followers of Christ who are to lead others to follow Christ. And so we're going to look at character issues today, and then we'll look at next week. We'll come back and pick up on conduct and competency or skills. So the first thing we see is to being above reproach or blameless. And the moment we say there, I'm sure there's many of you just jump right in the category of sinless. And that's a problem, because actually the Bible, and I think I put that text next, yeah, I did, so I'll jump here and I'll back up. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Please note there's no exception clause. If we say we have no sin except the pastor and deacons, because they have to be sinless, then we deceive ourselves. No, it's if anybody who identifies as a believer in Jesus Christ actually tries to come to the place they think they are no longer a sinner or they're no longer struggling with sin, they are in self-deception. Because we are all still sinners, just saved sinners, okay? So then if you're going to maintain a status of blamelessness, which the whole idea of blamelessness is above reproach or irreproachable, meaning there's not something to get hold of their life. And it's not that people aren't going to charge you. You're going to be charged with wrong all the time, especially if you represent Christ, right? And all those who live godly in Christ Jesus will what? Suffer persecution. A lot of that persecution comes with ridicule or accusation. Our culture accuses Christianity all the time of all kinds of hatred, of all kinds of bigotry, of all kinds of things that you will be accused of because you identify as a follower of Christ. You will be accused of things. There just should be no substance there. It's not that we're not going to be charged, okay? So blamelessness or irreproachability means there's really no substance to the charge in terms of getting into your integrity as a person who actually lives out the truths you believe. And then a blameless person, the other thing, so, 1:9 follows 1:8. I know that's a tough concept, but, there is actually a reason why 1:9 follows 1:8, because, okay, we're not sinless. What do we do about it? How do we maintain blamelessness? Aren't you glad John answers that question? Because believers still sin. I know this shocks you, but pastors still sin. And deacons still sin. And so what do those who are actually trying to live a Christ-like life do when they sin? They confess their sins. And he who is faithful and just forgives their sins and cleanses them from unrighteousness. It means you keep a short account with sin. It means you don't look to cover over, gloss over, repackage, reblame, relabel. We're not looking to relabel our sins and our disobedience, our lack of Christ-likeness. We're not looking for some category or psychological issue under which we can say, well, I just have that issue. It's just with me. That's how God made me. We're not looking to repackage and try to find another way to excuse a lack of Christ-likeness. Blamelessness does not go there. The call to Christ-likeness is to be above reproach, not sinless, but one who is in the midst of struggling with sin, is going to respond the way a believer's supposed to respond. I mean, we'll even get into qualifications for both pastor and deacons, dealing with our household, ruling it right. And I had a pastor friend of mine, and this was years ago, but his daughter went to Bible college. She went off in rebellion against the Lord. He was pastoring a church. There were some coming going, that means disqualification. Okay, now, as he led the church through the discipline of his own daughter out of the church for her sin, that's what a blameless person does. You see, he responded to his daughter's rebellion against God the way a believer responds, which included, in that case, the discipline of his own daughter out of their church. And we were together for a number of years in Michigan. I know for over 10 years, every time we were together, we did some conferences together as we put on some, anyway. So we would pray regularly for his daughter. And God in his grace did restore her. But it was 15 years later. God brought her to repentance. God restored, and they have a beautiful relationship. So when we deal with some of these, we have to really understand what the demand is and be careful we don't go beyond it. We don't minimize it. It's not one to be danced around or try to put it under. I guess another way to illustrate biblically a blamelessness, Daniel. I mean, Daniel's made a leader. In fact, his integrity is such that all the rest of those leaders who are jealous of his position, so he's serving right under Darius and all these other positional leaders, providential leaders, province leaders were all there, and they're jealous of Daniel's position. So they came up with a law. You know what we're going to make it do? Just for a little bit, we're going to make it illegal to pray. Because we know Daniel's integrity. He's going to keep on praying. Then we have a handle to charge him with. That's exactly what they did. Daniel knew about the law. He knew everything about it, and he kept praying. Why? Because he was a man of absolute integrity. And you know what? For his integrity, he got thrown in the lion's den. But with that integrity came the deliverance of God. And those who falsely charged him end up being lion's food. You don't know the whole story. So Daniel actually represents a great character study of one who was blameless before men. And so as we grow spiritually, our lives are being transformed by grace, and it is to further reflect Jesus Christ to others. We want them to see him and not us. Our lives are not our story. I wish we could get that one right in American culture. Your life is not your story. Your life doesn't belong to you or bought with a price. You're to glorify God with everything about your life. Your life is not meant to be the shining example of, look at me. You really want your life to be, see Christ. This is what Christ has done in my life. This is what he is doing in my life. We want others to see Jesus Christ, not ourselves. One of the authors I enjoy reading often puts it in the category of saying, you're either going to be building the kingdom of Christ or the kingdom of self. If you make life about self, you're going to be spending the time and energy to make it about you. And the category of blamelessness is that we keep it about the one who it really is about. It's about Christ. Second category is being the husband of one wife. So we see that both in Timothy and Titus. And so when we get into that, it could be translated on more meaning-oriented, the husband of a one-woman man or faithful to his wife. There's a number of things throughout the years that have been tried to be put. In a Roman Catholic world, it's the pastors are married to the church. That's the bride of Christ. They're married to the so you have to be a one-woman man, and your woman's the church. Okay, that is not what this text means. Not even close. Okay, so it is not married to the church. Some would say it's just against polygamy. Well, actually, historically, polygamy was not that big of an issue back then. So this is just not against polygamy like you have more than one wife. That certainly it prohibits that, but that's not primarily what is being emphasized here. There are those that say, well, you have to be a married bishop. You have to be married. You can't be single. Well, Paul himself was an apostle. He was single. So it's a little inconsistent. Paul goes on to say, actually, singleness is a gift from God that enables people to serve undistracted. So Paul certainly doesn't have a negative attitude about singleness. So I don't take it that this means that a pastor has to be married. So some would say it's a remarriage issue. So the pastor becomes a widow, his wife dies, now he can't remarry. Well, Paul actually says for those who are widowers that he would recommend they go on and serve the Lord, but they can remarry in the Lord and not sin. they can go on to remarry. And so they remarry in the Lord, meaning somebody else who is a child of God. So those are some ideas that have been kicked around. Probably when you come down to it, what is he talking about? He's talking marital faithfulness. He's talking a marital faithfulness, a committed husband, a faithful husband, steadfast with his wife. Now, the issue that's debated and kicked around, there's various positions that have been advocated on this issue is, so does a divorce permanently disqualify? I hope we would at least understand, if I, as your pastor here, if Rhonda and I go through a divorce, no matter what the reason is, at that moment I would be disqualified. Period, end of story. Because there would be serious question to my character, my integrity. Did I rule my house well? Did I love my wife right? All of those would be in question. All of those would be valid. Now, has a pastor ever been abandoned by a wife who actually just abandoned the faith, turned, and perhaps that pastor, we would say, was at least the innocent person in divorce? Has that ever happened? Well, sure it has. But at the moment of that divorce, there's an instant disqualification. Now, the debated point is, could there ever be a reestablishment of credibility before the local church? Could there ever be a later remarriage in the Lord, a reestablishment of credibility that allows them to go in and serve in that office? This would also apply to the office of deacon. Is that the case? And that's a difficult question, just being honest. It's a very difficult question. Because part of the issue is, if somebody has ever been through a divorce, in order to ever reestablish blamelessness, you have to go back and parse the first initial divorce to make sure they actually were the innocent party who was then qualified to remarry. And the further you get away from that divorce, and then you're hearing from one side of a party and not two, it's much more difficult. In fact, in my opinion, nigh unto impossible to ever reestablish that. And that is one of those where there's no handle. That's the idea of blameless. And so to have gone through divorce. So I understand there are churches that would take a different position. It would be up to the church body to work through that and be able to actually rightly understand this person was innocent in their divorce. They now have established a clear testimony, and they would feel comfortable saying they are qualified. Could that happen? I suppose it could. But it is a very difficult reality. In fact, where I came in, because I did a whole doctoral dissertation. If you want something to help put you to sleep at night, I've got a dissertation on the whole topic of divorce and remarriage, including case studies, and come down to a final recommendation. In my final conclusion, I would say it is very difficult for a church ever to ordain a divorced person. For a divorced person ever to be proven blameless, qualified for the office, I think is probably not the case. So I tried to state that as carefully as I can without being overly dogmatic. That doesn't mean I don't think the text is unclear, that there's a marital faithfulness demanded in the office. The question is, if there's been a marital failure, can that faithfulness ever be reestablished? That's the question. Some will answer it yes. My answer tends to be no. So I hope that makes that clear, at least clear where I understand the text. Part of that, here's what Peter would say to husbands. Dwell with your wives in an understanding manner. Give honor to the wife as a weaker vessel, being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers might not be hindered. And through divorce, there's the issue of dwelling together in an understanding way becomes keenly questioned. So we'll do just a couple more as we close out this morning, but just want to look at some of these other character qualities. Being temperate, sober-minded would be another way of translating that. Why? Because the words used here literally mean without wine, not to be intoxicated with alcohol. He's later going to talk about alcohol, so most understand he's using this more in a figurative way. He's not talking about, in this case, literal alcohol. He's talking about somebody sober-minded, temperate, somebody with self-control. That's what he's dealing with. Calm in judgment, somebody who is not hasty, not rash, not impulsive. That's the character quality of Christ-likeness. So in your life, my life, all of our lives, God would call us to be temperate or sober-minded, is to be calm in judgment, not to be rash, not to be quick to respond, to remember that there's all the biblical wisdom that keeps reminding us that hear both sides of an issue. Don't hear one side of an issue and respond on any issue, or you will be out of balance. We got all kinds of issues flying around today. I wish I could tell you go to a source that will be telling you the truth about those issues. Okay, but one of the things the world is seeking to do and the devil's seeking to do, remember, we just read in Proverbs, 6 things the Lord hates. The last one is the person who sows division among the brethren. And one of the things I'm thankful for our church, we've been through pandemic and all these different issues, it's still circulating. But one of the things we've really tried to navigate this ground well is, look, there's some of these issues that we will know much later who the truth tellers were and who weren't. Be very careful you come to dogmatic conclusions. You know who all the truth tellers are before you begin castigating everybody else around you for not agreeing with you. So you need to be calm and rash in judgment. We need to be careful before we jump to conclusion, and careful before we begin lambasting everybody who doesn't agree with our personal opinion about some issue that's going on in society around us. We have a source of truth about what we actually believe and about what our lives will look like, and here's one of those absolute you can't get around. Be temperate. Be calm. Don't be rash. That's like Christ. You don't know what Christ knows. Don't act like you do. So be sober-minded is the way that, so it's temperate, sober-minded, and this one comes into the idea of really being thoughtful, careful of thought. It's a nuanced difference, perhaps we could put it that way, but it is that which is serious-mindedness, it's earnestness in what we do. The demand is that we're just not a clown. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have fun, we can't tell jokes, can't laugh at each other. If you can't laugh at yourself, you got a problem. We do a lot of funny things. We do. We make mistakes, and they're funny. We do foolish things. It is okay to laugh at yourself. Now, personally, I was on staff with Pastor Harding, and we relished our staff. I've never started staffspiration because I don't think my skin's as thick as his. And Rob would get it. We used to have staffspirations, and any one of the pulpit blunders that he ever made, we were really good at noting them. And then at staffspiration, we had a lot of fun at his expense. And he loved to laugh at himself, thankfully, or we all would have lost our jobs. So, but the point is, we got to not take ourselves so serious on ourselves. But here's the other thing, but you better take life serious. Because it's heaven and hell realities. Life is serious in a broken world. There are really lost people around you who are going to die and go to eternal condemnation. And God really did put you in their life as a light of the gospel. You need to take that with gravity. That life is serious. Don't be overly serious about yourself. In the sense, don't take yourself too seriously. Because you make it about Christ. But remember, life has a gravity to it that we don't want to undermine. And that we actually want to take that opportunity to speak into lives. And so we're a thoughtful person. It's intentionality in living. Think about it. In Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, we know for by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves. It is a gift of God. But remember verse 10, we are his workmanship. You're a trophy of his grace. And you were created in Christ Jesus to actually do good things. To do good works, to engage in a life that actually looks good before God, to give a testimony of the gospel before men. Let your light so shine before the world, they see your good works, and they glorify God who did that in your life. There's an intentionality about spiritual engagement and spiritual growth that we want our life to reflect Christ to others. We want people to see that we've been redeemed by Jesus Christ. We want people to know that we've been in the presence of Jesus Christ. We want people to know what Jesus is doing in our life. Be thoughtful. Be intentional about that. Engage people. And that's really what he's calling. And then the final one we'll deal with this morning is just being free from the love of money, not greedy, not covetous. And I would just put that up with, in fact, the word translated here is the word for love connected to silver. So you do not, and it's put with an A, primitive with a negation, so it's don't love silver. Don't love money. Not a lover of money. And really, the idea of a lover of money is I've never one time in my life pulled out a dollar bill, no matter what denomination's on it, and go, oh, I love you, dollar. I just can't go anywhere without you. Well, that might be true, but I don't pick up that dollar bill and say, man, I just love this dollar. I don't have a closet or a drawer in home where I get in there and I just put that money all over me and say, man, this is so much fun. I love money. Okay, I think we know what we're talking about here. It's not loving that way. What it is it's actually believing that if you have enough of it, you can buy your way to whatever you think that is you want. It is a lover of what money provides. That's what you're called on not to be. Because we're actually called on to be content. Do you know to not be a lover of money means you need, what's the character quality? That is a character quality. And if I put it in a positive way, you need to be one who's known as content. And I guess we could say, all right, so if the microphone was following you around this week, were there more statements of praise from your mouth for what God has provided you, or were there more statements of complaint over what you do not have? It really does get down to the rubber meeting the road here, folks. Christ's likeness is content with God, content with His provisions for my life. It is contentment. Godliness and contentment go together. They're great gain. Because why are they great gain? It actually demonstrates you're a child of God. And there's eternity at stake in that reality. Because the people who actually just profess godliness, who don't have it, are always discontent and they want more. They want all that money can provide for them, and they think it's going to answer life's trials, and they move to positions of security based on the financial ramifications of those positions, and that's exactly what a godly person is not doing. We want maximum impact for eternity, not the TJ Maxx, maximum benefit for me with a little bit of money. And maximum impact usually looks like sacrifice. Because that's what love looks like. I mean, aren't you glad when Jesus was looking at that cross and he looked down at sinners like us, he didn't go, nah, they're not worth it. That's tough. Cross dying, nah, they're not worth it. And we weren't. We weren't. In our lost, lousy state of sin, we are not worth that sacrifice. Why would Jesus do it? For the honor of his Father. And for the glory that would come through the transformation of these lousy sinners to be trophies of grace. He knew what that sacrifice would accomplish. Therefore, it was worthy sacrifice. Folks, ministry looks like loving others. Looks like sacrifice. It looks like contentment with God's provision. Because in the end, as he says here, you brought nothing into the world. And you're not taking anything out with you. So be content with what God's provided. It is an issue of godliness. It is an issue of Christ-likeness. So we should be like Christ, free from the love of money. Not greedy, not covetous, but content. Content with God's provision. So I'll end with this. The Lord gave this warning. Take heed, beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses. The end of life, or even all along life's journey. I mean, the world might be impressed by your possessions. But there's not one day the God of heaven who created all things, who owns all things, went, wow, look what he owns. Wow, look what he made. Wow, look at that stuff he's accumulated. He needs a yard sale. Now, the Lord is not going to do this, okay? He is not. He's reminding us, your life, that's not your life. Don't become a slave to things. You're a servant of the King of Glory. Don't be enslaved by the things you own. They're gifts from God. Use them for his glory. Don't get enslaved to them. Let's close in prayer, shall we? Father, we bow our hearts before thee. We ask for understanding on these texts, that we would grow in our understanding of this text and understand as we look as a local church at a passage of Scripture that speaks to the office of leadership, that it does speak to all of our hearts. This is what Christ-likeness produces. It produces this kind of blameless character. This kind of blameless character that it will handle and keep short accounts with sin, that actually minds life and at least evaluates life in a biblical frame of reference. That we aren't being taken captive by the vain ideologies of the world around us that tell us to value things that really have no eternal significance. That tell us to find our worth in things that do not matter for eternity. Or they try to use our past failures as that which crippling guilt to say you really are unworthy of Christ. Well, we're always unworthy. Praise the Lord that Jesus paid it all on the cross of Calvary. That he loves unworthy sinners like us. That he redeems us with a gift of grace and a gift of faith and rescues us from sin so we no longer have to live in it, and gives us a new heart and clothes us in his righteousness and gives us his Spirit to dwell in us and prompt us and lead us and guide us in your truth and help us to live a life that actually honors you. And so our character has been transformed and is being transformed to reflect you to a world lost in darkness. And so we long for that reality of Ephesians 2:10 to be true, that we would live in the midst of the good things you've given us to do, and we would do them in such a way the world would see you and not us. We long to be a people known as content with you and with what you've provided, and then a people engaged in honest ministry and taking the gospel forward without the fear of men snaring us or the fear of the devil causing us to turn back in silence. Lord, we long to be like Jesus. We want to see these character qualities flourish in our life and be evident to others that we are yours. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for the text that teaches us how to be and really how our relationship with Christ, as it matures, as we grow in loving and knowing Christ, what that will look like in our daily living. Lord, help us to long for it. Even as we were admonished today in our life group time, that we would count those things that the world count gain as loss. The excellency, the surpassing greatness of knowing you. Lord, may nothing be more important to us than to grow in our knowledge, that is, our knowing you and living for you, and being strengthened by that grace, we might make you known. May we be disciples, followers of Jesus Christ, who make other disciples. And as we are being trained by Christ, may we be like our teacher, who is ultimately you. And we'll give you the praise. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.